I'm out in the shed again. Things have slowed down a little bit since I got the car taken to the certifier and had him look at it and say, yep, it was okay to go ahead and start making the body. I've been getting ready for the woodworking parts, so I have rearranged things around here a little bit. I've been buying a few little woodworking tools. I've got a pull saw now, a few marking out tools, new bandsaw blade, a new sort of guide that runs in the slot on the bandsaw, and I've just been playing around with the tools, making sure they're sharp. I've been watching a lot of Paul Sellers films. He's a woodworker who does everything with hand tools. I think the only power tool he says he uses is a bandsaw to chop down large pieces of wood, and the rest is all done traditional ways. So watching him has been quite instructional and inspiring as well, seeing what you can actually do. I've made one of his oil can oiling tin things. It's basically a whole bunch of material wrapped up in a tin and then soaked in oil, and he uses that to stop his tools rusting. Sort of wipes the plane on it and the chisels and things like that. I thought that was a good idea. One of the problems I have in Big Shed here is you can see it's uninsulated, and unlike that imaginary place, Saskatchewan, where it snows a lot apparently and the air is very dry, here the air is quite humid. It's not as bad in Wellington as in Auckland, of course, but what I find is in winter when the temperature drops, I get a lot of condensation inside and all my tools rust. So I try to keep everything coated in oil, especially bare steel like that. It comes with an oily coating when you buy it, so I just leave that on there. I did make a, what's it called? It's sort of a board that you use for planing the ends of pieces of timber, square. Shooting board, I think it's called. So I made that, and I quickly discovered that trying to use a metalworking vise on a workbench set up for metalworking doesn't really work for woodworking. So I have invested in a just a hobbyist grade sort of woodworking bench with a woodworking vise. That'll go in there. That's why I've been rearranging things a little bit, and I think that's going to help with the timber work. In terms of tools, you don't really need that much, I think. The joints are all fairly simple. I know how those all work now. And all I really need to do is actually start drawing out what the lines of the timber are. I do have plans, side and top views of various Brooklands, and I have those in my CAD software, and it's just a matter of drawing over those and figuring out the frame shapes. And then I think what I'll do is cut them out of MDF or something like that, at least just the stations, and then I can check that I've got decent fair curves and the height is going to be right and all that sort of thing. So I'll have to figure out that at some point. What else? I've started having another go at making a radiator. So this is an original saloon one. My backup plan, if this doesn't work, is I could always get this cut down. But for now, this is the one that used to be on 8075, which was an original Brooklands, but this isn't an original Brooklands radiator. This is also a saloon one that was cut down at some point, and it's the wrong size, it's too high, so I can't use that. And then this one was my first attempt at making one. And I learned quite a bit doing that. I learned that it is possible. I should be able to do it. This is 1mm steel. I can't remember what gauge that is. The new one I'm actually making from 1.2, so that it's going to be a little bit easier for me to weld, and it gives me more material to file down to get a smooth finish on the outside. So what I'm doing at the moment is making the sort of nose piece that goes in here. I have roughed up the sides. These are more or less flat. You can see there's actually a little bit of curve and crown in them, but those are fairly close based on there. One of the modifications I'm doing on the second one is when I made the first one, I ended up with the joins in a really awkward place. So the joins ended up on the other side, right where this fold needed to be, and or right where the weld is. So the fold is where the weld is, and so when I folded it over, it broke. I had to weld it up. So I'm allowing myself more, and I'm going to bring the sides up further so that the joins are actually not on the corners if I can help it. Like I say, the sides are pretty easy. There's not much shape in them. You can just do that on the wheel pretty easily. And trying to make this nose piece is a lot harder because there's an awful lot of shape in it. So I have been using one of these contour gauges. Arco on his channel, Outlaw Edge, it must have been a month or two ago, did a little review of these. And I've always been meaning to get one, and I didn't realize that these plastic ones are actually pretty cheap and perfectly functional. I think this was like $13 or something, New Zealand, so really cheap. So I've got one, and I'm using that to help me get the shape. The other thing I've got that really helps to get the shape is another Riley badge, which is curved. So to get the shape of the nose correct, I just have to keep shaping the metal until the badge sits flat. And this has been wheeled quite a bit. That is a lot of crown. And basically what you do is you beat the crap out of it. I've been using my Pexto hammer. And you just figure out, well, it needs to have more curve in the middle, so you stretch it. You basically bash it a lot like that. Obviously it goes all lumpy on the outside, but it's stretched the metal, and then you run it through the wheel and it planishes it out. And basically that's all I've been doing. I just keep going ahead, whacking it a bit. It looks horrible once you've done that. It actually takes a little while to get your brain into thinking, well, I've just made this piece of metal all nice and smooth and shiny, and now I have to make it all lumpy and horrible again by literally smacking lumps into it. But that's what you need to do, and it stretches out the metal. So I'm going to keep going with that. Most of the complex shape in this is this nose piece, and then you've got this front piece. This top piece isn't actually too bad. If you can kind of look and you can figure out where you want the joins to be. And if you look at a curve like that, that seems like a lot of curve if you look all the way around. But if you look at it as split up the middle, this is more or less flat with a slight curve, and then this is flat with a slight curve. And you can do those slight curves with a hammer and dolly, get them to meet up, weld it, and then smooth it all out. That's the theory anyway. I'm still learning and still practicing, but it more or less worked on this. This one didn't come out too bad for a first go. And then this piece at the bottom is actually reasonably straightforward. It's just more or less flat. It's got a little bit of shape in it. It just gets a bit awkward because you've got these flanges bent on it, and anyone will know as soon as you bend flanges on something, it changes the shape of the panel. But again, it's just knowing where to shrink it and where to stretch it. And if you do that, it all just pulls into shape. So it's getting a bit dark and cold. I think that may be where I'll leave it tonight. I may just do a little bit more. One thing I have been looking at is this English wheel. It's obviously a modern one. It's not too bad. It seems to do the trick, but there's actually a lot of flex in it, even though it's steel section. And I was wondering, you can, it's hard with one hand. I've got this pretty tight at the moment so I can planish things out. But you can almost see when you push the metal in that the frame springs apart. And one thing I was wondering is what would happen if you drilled a hole through the bottom here, drilled a hole through the top here, and put a bar through it, like a threaded rod, so that you can stop these springing apart, does it make any difference to how well the wheel works? I know it makes a difference to how they feel, but does it actually make them behave differently? It would be interesting to see. Obviously, if you do that, you've lost all this throat distance, but it would be removable. And when you're doing a little panel like this, you know, you could effectively choke this up all the way to here. I think if I was actually going to try that and see if it makes any difference whatsoever, I would use angle iron. I'd use a piece of angle here and 2 threaded rods that go all the way down, so I can sort of pinch the 2 bits of frame. But yeah, it's interesting. You don't necessarily need it that tight all the time, but it'd just be interesting to try that and see if it makes it faster or feels smoother or make it easier to use. I don't really know. I do know when Joss was teaching me the English wheeling, he was saying he'd learnt the feel of his wheel, which was a good, proper, solid cast iron Edwards wheel. Big giant thing. And he said if he tried to use this wheel, he probably wouldn't be able to do it without a lot of practice because the feel would be different. So I guess you just get used to what you've got. And I mean, it works fine. It puts a lot of shape into things. So I'm going to keep going with that for a little while longer, I think. This just shows what it looks like after you've whacked it with a hammer a few times. You can see it gets very, very lumpy. But then you can run it through the wheel and just smooth it all out again. And you keep doing that a few times and the metal stretches every time you do it, and eventually you get the shape you want. I find it can help. I've used noise cancelling headphones just to block out the noise of the hammering, and it can actually help to do this to music. So it just gives you the right rhythm for smashing the metal. I find 80s Italian disco works well. The other thing I should mention is to thank a friend of mine who sent me up a set of headlamps for the car. These are actually Lucas lamps. I believe originally the Brooklands had Rotax lamps. I can't remember the number, 540s I think. The other box of lamps that came with the parts car are Rotax ones, but they're in really, really bad shape and they're missing lenses and reflectors and all sorts of things. My friend sent me up 2 of these style Lucas lamps, which are about right for the car. They'd look fine on the car, they're period correct. And I went looking through my boxes of parts and realised I've actually got 2 very similar ones. That's these ones, which unfortunately somebody's drilled a hole through and didn't even deburr it. And also the bases are a little bit rusty on one of them. But I also happen to have with those a couple of glass lenses and more of the outside rings. So what I'm hoping is I have enough there to actually put together a set of lights for the car. And they should be fine. They'll let me finish the car, and if I can ever come across a set of the actual Rotax, the real ones, then I can always swap them over later. But hopefully there's enough parts there for me to make them. I think I will need to get new reflectors. I know you can do that for some of the other Lucas lamps. I did that on my Austin 7. It was easier to buy new reflectors. I do have several sets of reflectors there, but I'm not sure what the story is with getting them silvered. I believe there is a place fairly local to me that'll do it, but I don't know what the cost is on that, or if they can do it on these. So that's something else to find out about when I get the chance. But yeah, thanks to my friend who sent me these. You'll know who you are. It's a real help. This is where I've got to for tonight. It's getting there. It's a bit of an awkward shape, and I'm not sure if I've split it up the right way to make the pieces, but this is kind of how I did it last time, and it more or less worked. And you can see it's getting closer. I'm not worried about getting it touching all the way around, because of course a lot of this gets trimmed off, so you just sort of get it touching around where the line is. And this piece in the middle, it's sort of like it's almost like a beak. This piece here, you can see it better on this one. This comes down quite a lot. So I think what I actually did on this one is I ended up doing a lot of that with a hammer and dolly in the end, just to get this piece to fold down a little bit more. Once you've folded this flange, you can sort of pull it down by shrinking this a little bit. It'll make it pull. So I think that's kind of where I'm going to stop for the night. It's cold and it's wet and it's dinner time, but you can see the badge is getting close. Still just a little bit of rock. So I've pretty much got the right sort of peak in the middle there. And I'm wondering if these were originally handmade, because this one isn't the same shape as the other one. There were different sorts of grills, but you can actually see on this one, might be a bit tricky to see, but this badge doesn't actually sit flat. It's built up with solder under the bottom edge here, so this bit here is thicker than this bit where the badge is soldered on, which is kind of interesting. So this is, it's getting there. So I guess the rest will be done after work tomorrow. Haven't been doing too much this weekend. I've had other things to do and other distractions, but I have been trying to do a little bit on the new radiator parts each evening. I've done the sort of nose piece. It's a bit hard to get it to fit on this one because it still has the Riley badge in place, but this one here kind of helps me get the shape a bit better. This is close. It needs flattening a little bit, but you only need to get it sort of close, and if you can force it into shape after it's all been welded, you can hammer it back into shape. So that's the nose. I'm guessing it's called the nose, I have no idea. And these are the side pieces. I put in this curve. There's actually crown, you can sort of see that way as well as that way. So this is kind of an interesting little curve, this bit here. You can see the sides aren't straight. They actually do curve in. So when I fold the edge over, I can do that. I break the fold so that it is not straight on the edges. Measuring this thing up, I'm pretty sure these must have been handmade, because they're not even the same from side to side. They're actually quite wobbly in some places. I'm not sure if you can see, but I mean, that just could be old and damaged, but they're not perfect. So I don't have to get mine perfect. It just has to get good enough. One thing I have done that I did differently from the last time is I've made these come up further. One of the mistakes I made last time was where my joins was right where this piece had to fold, which was a bit daft. So I've done sort of roughed out the sides and the front. I still need to do the top, which isn't too hard. There's not a lot of shape in the top. I've got my sheet of steel over there, so I'll have to cut some more out of that. The car, I'm just painting the brake pedal. One of the things that the certifier mentioned to me I might like to do is to make the pedals non-stick, or non-slip rather. You can use non-stick anti-skid tape. So it's basically like sandpaper with adhesive on the back. And he said it would be a good idea to put some of that on the face of the pedals just to make them a bit grippier. I'm not sure if that's a requirement or not, but it was a good suggestion. So what I will do is stick some of that on here, and I'll punch out the holes still. I've got a hole punch thing I can use to do that. The brake pedal I've painted so it doesn't rust, and that's sitting in my little toaster oven with for the paint to be baked on. And I'm still playing around with the woodworking, but my little cheap woodworking bench arrived, and it's a bit tricky to see, but the woodworking bench is much lower than the metalworking bench, especially with the vise on there. So that should be a bit easier for me to do the woodworking on. And I've just been playing with bits and pieces. One of my colleagues at work, I told him what I was up to, and he gave me some little scraps of ash that he had. And that's the first time I've ever actually seen it, apart from at the timber merchant place. So it's quite good to see this and see what it's like, and then see how well it works and how you plane it and drill it and all that kind of thing. The workbench, it's only a cheap one. I'm an amateur metal worker who just wants to do enough woodwork to build the frame for this car. I don't know if it's something I really want to get into. I've got enough hobbies as it is, so I just wanted something that's going to work for this. I mean, really, you should probably make your own workbench. I guess that's probably what most woodworkers end up doing. But this will do for now, and it's got little drawers in it, so I can put all my tools and bits and pieces, everything's out of the way. The only problem with it is the vise was rubbish. Well, it still is rubbish. Basically, it's just a screw and these two metal rods that are kind of embedded into this block. And supposedly with this, you can move it around. So they've actually got the sort of captive nut thing, effectively, if we can see it up under there. I don't know if we'll be able to see it. There we go. So there's actually 6 of those around this bench, and the idea is you can just move it around and they go into there. The problem is these are just holes in the wood, and the whole vise was just so wobbly. It was unusable. So you would clamp something in the top and the jaw would just bend. So I was thinking of making something up, machining something up, welding tubes in or things like that. And in the end, I discovered I had some aluminium tube that's exactly the right diameter to slide over these metal pieces. So all I did was remount the holes, and I've epoxied 2 bits of tube in there. And that's actually made it quite usable now. We can, well, it's a bit hard to see again, but there's one of the tubes there, all epoxied in place. And yeah, it's not perfect, but it works. So I've just been playing around with bits of wood, rough bits of 2x4 and planing them up. This was just some timber I had from, I think they were old bed slats. I'm not even sure where I got them from. Possibly in one of the organic rubbish collections. And I don't even know what sort of timber this is, but they were all varnished, so I've just sort of been planing the edges. This was to make, is it winding sticks, I think they're called, where you can test for twist on things, but it was just an excuse to plane some bits of wood. I've gone through and cleaned up the plane. I had also made the shooting board so I can plane the ends of things square, and I found it wasn't actually leaving them square, it was giving me a slight angle. And I measured up the plane, and it turns out the sides and the sole weren't perpendicular to each other. And when I put a straight edge across the sole, it was really warped. So the good thing is, being an amateur metal worker, I've got the tools to be able to fix that. So basically I stripped it all down and I put it on the mill and fly cut it. And that's worked beautifully. It's come out really well. The edges are nice and perpendicular to each other now, so it works a lot better. I might actually need to just deburr that corner a little bit. I've also been practicing with how you sharpen the blade and things like that, and I've got it working pretty well now. So I'm trying not to buy too many tools. I don't need a lot of tools for this. So I have got the plane. I have got a little one of these Japanese saws now, which is really nice to use. It's very, very thin kerf, and it cuts really well. And that's about it. A few measuring tools, some sharpening things. I have a slightly better chisel set on the way, mainly because the chisels I've got are just sort of, cheap ones, and I've only got a couple of sizes. I really need a slightly smaller one. The other thing I did buy for, I think it was $5, was like a bit brace, and I knew at a local op shop that they had a box full of these bits, so I bought some of those. They were a few dollars each. These two larger ones have never even been used. They still have the wax coating on them, so they were all rusty. I just cleaned them up, so de-rusted them, and they've been sort of oiled up now, so they shouldn't rust again. But now I've got a place to work and some tools. I have been playing around with drawing up the plans for the body. I'm actually doing it in Fusion 360, my CAD program. I can draw it up in that. This was sent to me by someone, which is, it's not a scale drawing, but it's got dimensions on it. So it's a dimensioned drawing of a similar body. Not exactly what I'm trying to do, but it basically gives me all of the relative measurements for the stations and where they are and how far they are. And I've actually scanned that in, and in my CAD software I can overlay it with whatever I'm drawing. You can import images and then calibrate the image so it's the correct size, and then draw over it, draw around it. That's actually how I make gaskets a lot of the time. I either photograph or scan the part, and then I can draw the gasket directly over the photo of the part. But I've got several different side views and plan views of different Rileys, different Brooklands bodies and different styles, and they're all very similar. And this again is very, very similar to what I've got. So I'm basically using this to come up with my own dimensions that'll work for me. They're going to be very close to any other ones. So I'm using my CAD drawing, various plan views, the various sort of blueprints I've found on the internet, all kind of munged together to give me a representative frame, a body. I've also got a lot of photos of an original one, 8075, internal photos showing exactly how the frame works and where it all sits. There's also metal work inside there to help bolt things together. So I'm actually getting a pretty good idea of how this all fits together. I've bought a few sheets of MDF for now, just smaller ones, but they'll be big enough for me to trace out the outline of the different stations effectively. So you've got the very front, you've got effectively where the instrument panel goes, behind the seat, in front of the boot opening, and then the back of the boot opening and the tail. So that should be enough that I can cut out the stations from that with a jigsaw and sort of temporarily prop them all up on the chassis and just check the lines of things, check that I've got fair curves and that it's all going to work, that everything clears and it's all going to fit nicely. Because I have that original door, my body is going to have a door, going to have doors, and I'm sort of using that door to reference everything more or less, because on the Brooklands bodies that have doors, you can look at the photos and you can easily judge from the photos where everything is in relation to the door, and things like the rivets, where the chassis cross member goes and where the rear spring hanger is. That lets you pretty much position where everything needs to go. So that's pretty much where I'm at. The timber place that sells ash are able to cut it and I believe dress the timber for me as well. So at some point, once I know what I need, I'll start actually getting some oak planks, not oak, ash planks, boards, and start playing around with that and seeing how I get on, I guess. A few people have commented, oh, you know, you can go to places or furniture makers or people like that, and they can make the body for me. But the whole point is I want to build it myself. If you're building an entire car yourself, you might as well do everything yourself. So that's the main reason I'm doing all of this. This is why I want to build the car. I want to know how to build the car. I don't just want to pay someone to do it for me. So that'll be interesting. And speaking along lines of that, one of the other things I should then probably learn how to do, as if the list isn't big enough already, is upholstery. So I should probably start keeping an eye out for a suitable sewing machine, so that I could actually make the seats myself, which shouldn't be too complicated. I don't think they're that complex, to be honest. So that's another thing I should look into learning how to do, I guess. So still making progress. It just seems to have been a little bit slow lately, just trying to get everything set up and get everything ready so I can actually start doing things. One last thing, I guess it's a little bit of a rant, but I've been trying to find another one of these tape measures. I've had this one for a while, a Stanley one, 5 meters, but it's marked in metric and imperial, so it's incredibly useful. And I thought, oh well, I'll get another one of those. They're just really handy to have. And it turns out the Mitre 10 we went to, which is like the big home store type thing, only had imperial tape measures, metric tape measures rather. This isn't one I bought then. This is another one I happen to have that's metric on both sides. But they didn't have any tape measures at all that had imperial measurements, which I thought was kind of strange. You might not think it makes much difference, but this being an old car, everything is actually measured in imperial. And obviously I could convert everything, but it's just easier to measure it in the measurements that all the fasteners are and all the timber's going to be and that kind of thing. So I just found that strange that I couldn't actually find a tape measure like this that had both metric and imperial on it. So I'm going to have to look a bit further afield, I think.